Hi everyone and welcome back. I hope you're all feeling refreshed after Fit with Frank. I know we are. I am just going to quickly run through a couple of things before we get started. So if you are wanting to use the captions, it's the icon at the bottom that says CC. And during this session, you can ask questions and leave comments in the chat function. But I'm not going to waffle on too much because I'm delighted to introduce Alma Sheren, who is an independent marketing communications consultant with a background in HR. And Alma will be speaking about the hot topic, the recruitment landscape, post-COVID and virtual interview techniques. So I will hand over.
Hello, I'm Alma Sheren. I'm the Marketing and Comms Lead for Greenacre Group, and I am business owner at Virtual Office Solutions, which is a business employment support service. And just before I start, I just want to apologise if I end up looking like a character from a dystopian novel halfway through this. My glasses broke just before I had to do this video, and I've had to run down to John Lewis to get this snazzy pair off the shelf, which, as you can see, does not have protection from reflective light. So and as this is not a very light room, I'm having to use one of those halo lights, so I do apologise and I hope it's not too distracting. That being said, let's get into it. So this session is going to be broken into three parts. The first part is going to talk about how the recruitment and employment landscape has changed post-COVID. The second part will be giving some tips and advice on conducting and attending virtual interviews. So I'm just going to give you a little bit of background about Greenacre Group. If you've not heard of Greenacre, the group comprises of three business divisions. We've got the recruitment division, which provides an intuitive recruitment service to the housing industry. We've got Greenacre Exec, which caters to the executive level side of recruitment, and we've got Consult. Greenacre Consult runs a leadership development programme that helps up and coming and existing leaders to develop their leadership skills so that they can cope and thrive in the new post-COVID work environment, and really to lead teams effectively through change and uncertainty. So I'll kick off by saying probably what's obvious, which is that, the work environment has changed dramatically over the past year and a half, and it's safe to say that things are probably never going to go back to the way they were before the C word hit us. And this has affected everybody, as we know, from all walks of life all over the globe. People's expectations have actually changed in relation to what feels okay in the workplace now. And hybrid and remote working are now considered to be the new normal. And I'm really sorry to have got that phrase in there, but as we're talking about the recruitment landscape, I've had to get it in there somewhere. But I do hate that word, that phrase. Anyway, so from a recruitment perspective, there is becoming a much bigger emphasis now on people's potential and their values, and also their candidate culture. We hear about organisational culture a lot, but by a candidate culture, what I mean is how they fit into an organisation according to their beliefs, their ethics, and their values and their team dynamics. And when we screen and we get people through the interview stage, the more traditional qualities that we used to look for in candidates based around people's work experience, maybe what's included on their CV, are now actually becoming less relevant. Experience can be taught, as we know, and with so many roles needing to be adaptive and more specific now according to each organisation's needs, CVs don't really give that clear enough perspective now on how well individuals can adapt to these continuously changing roles that we're all experiencing in the modern work environment, and how organisations now are having to continually adapt to these external changes. So they're really, looking for a different kind of candidate now. The latest research is showing that the vast majority of UK businesses need to critically improve the quality of their recruitment processes and the way that they assess the values and the skills that people bring into their business. The 2021 Mind the Trust Gap report from Thomas International has indicated that there's a massive shift in the way that we hire, develop and retain our talent now. And the vast majority of hiring managers now believe that predictive hiring and hiring for potential will be playing an essential part in their future recruitment processes over the next 2 years, and it's a much higher priority now. That's not the only thing that's being affected. The ability to hire without borders and recruit from further afield due to the remote work movement is allowing much more diverse types of candidates to emerge now into different roles. People who would normally not consider themselves suitable for a role, perhaps because maybe they live too far away, or they have a disability, or they need to get to work, or they need their work to really kind of work around their family commitments. and that element of flexibility. All these kinds of people are now finding their work world opening up more and their talents being better recognised with less barriers stopping them from applying. On the other side of that coin, throughout the pandemic, it's actually been women, and particularly women of colour, who have actually borne the brunt of the burden of this, having to juggle work and home and childcare, and actually facing more redundancies due to the types of positions that they're working, and actually being paid less for doing the same work as their counterparts. So there's a flip side to that as well. But generally, we're seeing that the roles that are requiring more flexibility, that are allowing more flexibility and adaptability, are now opening up to people who've got all this fresh talent to offer, but who previously weren't able to apply for these kinds of roles. Psychometrics and AI tools, we've got to talk about technology. These are also playing a much bigger part now in determining how we screen how well someone will fit a particular role, where their strengths lie, how much potential they might have as they grow within their organisation. And the emergence of data-driven technology tools means that we're able to now attract and hire the most suitable candidates with more speed and more efficiency, and without that potential barrier of unconscious bias. Now, this is all very impressive. It really is. But without that healthy company culture that continually evolves alongside those individuals that people are hiring, there is the potential for organisations to lose this valuable talent just as fast as it's taken them to find them. It is true that successful hiring teams are being pushed towards this data-led environment, but what's really, really important is that they must also be able to demonstrate that they're aware of the importance of a healthy company culture and the part organisational behaviour plays in maintaining people once they've got them through the door. And employee retainment is actually a very hot topic right now. You've probably heard of the Great Resignation. We're seeing this all across the globe. This shows that employees are no longer satisfied with their current work models that we previously accepted as normal before the pandemic took hold. And we're all kind of learning that actually we don't need to be micromanaged, that our mental health is actually really important, and working to our own rhythm and our own space and time is actually much more rewarding and motivating than being boxed into a strict 9 to 5 with, say, 2 hours heavy commute each way, or whatever situation people were individually dealing with. And many people are now looking for roles and careers which are much more meaningful to them, so they've got a better work-life balance. They allow that flexibility and that autonomy to work to their own schedule or rhythm. And a lot of people are now wanting their work to add real value to other people or to the environment or even to their communities as they realign their values and what matters most to them. And I think, we've all been through something that shows us that life is short. Nothing is guaranteed, and we really should be prioritising those things that we didn't necessarily prioritise before. And with this big movement across the workforce for a much higher priority now on mental health and well-being in the workplace is creating a need for a different kind of approach from employers, really to accommodate these evolving demands. I don't know if you've seen the recent Gallup report, State of the Workplace, which shows 7 in 10 people globally are struggling or suffering in their work lives. And actually, employee disengagement in the UK is reported to be around 90%, which is that's staggering, really. It's really worrying. The survey also revealed that across every generation, workers are seeking out organisations that care about their well-being. And if they're not experiencing this in their current setting, they're actually leaving and they're finding somewhere else to go. So this really makes it hit home that these issues are not going to go away anytime soon, and company culture is having a huge impact on employee retention. And Greenacre Consult recently held our August Directors Networking session, which brought together a group of directors from across the country who shared their own leadership experiences and insights throughout the pandemic. And some of the most common experiences that we found were based around realising the need for creating a company culture which not only recognises the importance of mental health and well-being in the workplace for the benefit of employees and themselves, obviously, because leaders' mental health is absolutely essential in order to be able to lead others effectively. And many leaders forget, that their mental health is just as important. But, also understanding the bottom line that when the workforce is happy, more people want to work for you, more people are motivated to give their best, and employee retention rates rise, and of course so does your profit. And so to attract the best and the most engaged and the most motivated people, you have to really get your company culture right. And I can't emphasize this enough. I know I'm banging on about it a little bit, but you really have to model that behavior that you want others to follow. For example, are you creating that environment where your employees know that it's okay to take regular breaks away from the screen? As leaders, are you making sure that each individual feels safe and supported in their role? Are you checking in regularly with your colleagues just to make sure they're not feeling isolated or overwhelmed? Are you modelling that behaviour, that it's okay to let people know that you're struggling and you need creative space away from your desk as well? Because, if you show others that this is okay, then they will feel safe to express these things and experience these things themselves. Are you taking that time to understand how everyone is coping differently with these transitional periods that we're all experiencing as we come in and out of these lockdowns and we adapt to our new work environments, because we just don't know what's around the corner right now, do we? Some people will have thrived working from home, and I've got to be honest, I'm one of those people. I feel less distracted working from home. I get more done. It fits better with my family's needs. I just work better when I can manage my own time, and it really gives me a better sense of well-being. But there are others who've got a very different situation to mine, and they thrive on that office workplace dynamic and interacting face to face with other people, and those water cooler moments where people just want to catch up and talk about stuff that might not necessarily be work related, but actually is just as important for connecting with your colleagues every day. Some of your colleagues might have felt very isolated at home and really need that sense of normality and to feel much more productive in a workplace structure. We're all experiencing these changes differently, and it's really important to make sure that we look after each other and that everyone feels supported, listened to, and that those safe spaces are created for people to talk about how they're really coping and feeling if they need to. And I'm not suggesting every organisation should completely be touchy-feely, and every organisation has its unique culture, of course. But it is really important in these changing and, let's face it, pretty stressful times that we are adapting our organisational culture to support those who need it most and who essentially have been keeping your organisation going through all of this, if we're honest. So that's a bit about the recruitment and employment landscape right now and how it's been evolving during the course of the pandemic. And I'm now going to give some tips for people who are hiring and conducting virtual or remote interviews. So if you're a candidate looking for interview tips, please fast forward to the next section, which is for you. Alternatively, please keep watching, because it might actually give you that confidence to realise that people conducting interviews are also human and are still learning how to navigate these new remote practices. And it might actually help you to feel a bit more confident when you have your interview and you're not having to rely solely on that imagining everybody naked trick. To be fair, they might well be from the waist down anyway, but you're not going to know that. So you're only going to be seeing their top half. So that's worth bearing in mind. That being said, let's get into it. So just to give you a bit of context, again, over the past year and a half, most of our hiring and our training and our onboarding processes have, for the most part, been handled remotely. And this has caused a lot of headaches for many, let's be honest. We really don't know if the next lockdown is going to be around the corner, as I've said before. And, we've had to become prepared for any eventuality so that our organisations can still function effectively with some degree of normality. What once used to be a really good interview process or technique face-to-face might not necessarily translate particularly well through a virtual or a remote setting. On the other hand, there may be some benefits to holding interviews remotely, perhaps due to the cost and the time-saving benefits, particularly with interim and temping. But it can also give us an indication about how competent your future employees might be with technology, how they might come across remotely to your customers and your clients. And there's also the added advantage of recording the interview, which can be then analysed afterwards and even forwarded on to other people for a more in-depth analysis of their suitability, which can lead to a lot less ambiguity, which is also another really important factor. So my first tip would be to decide on the best interview model for your interview process. And what I mean by this is you really need to think carefully about who you're going to be picking for your interview team, how well they're going to fit, how do they come across and communicate when they're interviewing people remotely. What methods are you going to be using to present that information to your candidates? For instance, are you going to be using online assessments? Are you going to be planning on replicating a full assessment day remotely? God help you if you are. Have a think about the planning and the timing that's needed for this. And the most important thing that we need to consider is that the focus has got to be on making the experience for the candidate as seamless a process as possible and pain-free. If you've prepared properly in making sure that the experience is a seamless process for them, it's no doubt going to influence that candidate's decision should they be offered the role. My second tip is to check your tech. You know, we've all been there, probably fairly regularly over the past year and a half. You know, there's nothing worse than an interviewer's tech failing at the crucial moment in an interview. It looks a bit poo, let's face it. It reflects badly on the company, and it leaves a lasting impression on the candidate, more importantly. So if you need to really ensure that interview panelists have got the right tech installed on their devices, make sure they've all been sent the relevant documents, and just basically, make sure that you're testing everything's working for everyone well in advance. Number 3 is to make sure everyone in the virtual interview room has got a suitable background and environment to conduct the interview in. At the beginning of the pandemic, I would have said make sure there's no animals, particularly cats' bottoms appearing to float across the screen at crucial points, or, children bursting into the room, or, things like that. But actually, I think one of the brilliant things that's come out of the pandemic and remote working is that we all pretty much understand now that we're all human. We have a life separate to work, and sometimes actually intrinsically intertwined with work, and that actually it's okay to show this human side. So I'm not going to say no cat's bottoms, but I will say that it is important to ensure that there's no distracting background noises, no distracting things going on here, that the room is light, that your background is uncluttered, because as you've probably seen throughout the process of this, these things can really be distracting, and they can impact the interview process and be distracting to the interviewee. So make sure you turn off all your phones as well and notifications, so that the candidate really understands that you're giving them your full attention. Number 4 is to communicate effectively with each other before and during the interview. So, make sure everybody knows who's leading the interview, what roles each panellist is playing, so that, again, you're creating that seamless process. Make sure all the panellists understand how you're going to communicate during the interview as well. For instance, are you going to be talking to each other through a chat box or another function, and does everybody understand how to use it? Tip 5, and this is actually really important, is think about your schedule and how it's going to be affecting everybody's mental health. For instance, if you're conducting interviews all day in front of a screen, make sure that you're factoring enough regular breaks for everybody to have time away from their desks, so that you're avoiding everyone burning out. Everyone feels refreshed enough, of course, to play their role effectively, and that you're giving the same amount of energy to the last candidate as you have to your first. You need to factor these things in and give enough time for panellists to give their feedback and thoughts as well throughout the day. So don't forget these really important bits. Number 6 is to prepare your candidate. Obviously, that's a bit obvious, but some people don't think about this. It is good practice to send the interviewee a guide to the interview process, just so that they're prepared and they know what to expect. Make sure you've explained how the day or the time slot is going to be spent, what's going to be expected of them, and what to bring if necessary. Just be clear and direct. Introduce each panellist. And if you're taking notes, just let them know, so that they understand why you're typing and writing as they speak, and they don't think you're just being rude. Number 7 is make sure there's a plan B. Even with the best intentions and the most well-prepared interview team, there's always a chance your tech could fail due to power cut, or just something breaks, like your glasses, at a crucial point of the interview. So just make sure that you have enough time and you've given yourself a backup plan, just in case there's anything unexpected happening or any disruption to the connection. My next tip is to make sure that you show up before the candidate. So make sure that you and anyone else from the interview panel is ready and waiting for the interviewee before the start of the interview. You really don't want them to be having to hang around and wondering if you're going to show up. They're going to be nervous enough as it is, let's face it, without you guys meandering onto their screen with a half-drunken coffee or beer, hopefully not beer, or anything else, showing up in dribs and drabs. This is just, not good practice. And, if you come and you show up first, it shows them that you're prepared, and it makes them feel welcome. Giving a good first impression of you and your team and organisation online in a virtual interview is a really crucial part of the interview process. Tip number 9, and this is another very important piece of advice, is to be self-aware. Our body language can come across differently through a screen, so just ensure that you're coming across as engaged and listening. Look into the camera. Make sure the candidate feels that they're being listened to, and communicate your questions and responses with clear use of signals such as, nodding, facial expressions, or other actions. Apart from grimacing, or pulling a funny face, that's probably not going to go down too well or help them to feel confident or comfortable. But, Make sure that you're communicating well as a panel as well. Give each other space to interject, to, talk about things without over speaking or overlapping or, repeating what somebody else has said. Make sure that when you end the interview, you close the session clearly, outlining what the next steps will be. And obviously, if there is a second interview stage for them, make sure you outline that structure, explain how and when they're going to hear back from you and what they should do to prepare if they do end up being successful. My final tip for interviewing remotely is to ask candidates for feedback. We always advise candidates to ask for feedback from interviews when we talk to our own candidates. How often do we actually do this as an interviewer? It's really important to ask for feedback on how the candidate experienced their remote interview, because this is going to be crucial for you to understand how effective you've been and how to improve your future interviews if necessary. It's a learning process. As we've discussed early on, everything is changing all the time. Technology is changing, candidate expectations are changing, leadership and development are changing. It's really important to keep on asking questions and, more importantly, to keep listening. So that's the second part of my session. For my final part, you'll be relieved to know I'm going to give some tips to candidates who are being interviewed remotely. As an interviewee, it's really important to make sure that you're aware of how things have changed regarding the interview process and that you can really put yourself across in the best way possible when being interviewed remotely. Tip number 1 is to make sure you prepare for your role thoroughly. Okay, this seems fairly obvious, but you would be surprised how many candidates think, it's only a video call. We don't really need to make the same amount of effort as a face-to-face interview. And that's a really big mistake, because, you should always be putting the same effort into a virtual interview as you would be to a face-to-face one. It's not a dress rehearsal. First impressions are important, so do make sure that you've researched that company, you've researched the role, their shared vision, their values, and if you're able to as well, the person or the people that are going to be interviewing you, look them up on LinkedIn and connect with them, engage on topics and posts that they're engaging in, get to know their personalities on a professional level as much as you can, so that you've got that connecting discussion points and shared points of interest. This really helps to break the ice and that breed that familiarity between you and take away that kind of edginess of what not to expect. My second tip is to make sure that you're prepared mentally. And what I mean by this is make sure that you've done whatever you need to do to find your zen. It's really important to feel and come across as calm and collected. So, make sure you can find that quiet space before the interview just to become centered and get into your zone. If it helps, you can maybe make use of meditation or breathing techniques or use affirmations. Give yourself that positive reinforcement. Number 3 is to make sure your tech is working properly. I've mentioned this in the interviewer tips as well, but if you can demonstrate that you are adept at using technology efficiently, this is really going to help build confidence in your ability to communicate effectively with your clients and customers. So make sure you don't fall at the first hurdle. Do a test run, practice with someone and get it right before the interview. This will also help to minimize some of those pre-interview nerves as well. Having said that, if technology does fail you at the crucial time, which it may well do, it happens to all of us, don't panic. Just be honest, bounce back, carry on, because it's often how you deal with a crisis that really shows your ability to adapt well and keep going, and it could actually work to your advantage. Tip 4 is make sure you're creating the right environment. So make sure you don't have any distractions or disruptions. Make sure that there's no background noise, get the lighting right if you can, and make sure the sound is of good quality as well. We can't control everything. I live quite near Luton Airport, and sometimes they decide to change the flight paths when I'm in the middle of having a meeting, and, all you can hear is this big crushing noise behind me. Things like that you can't really control, but the things you can, make sure you do, and make sure that you've done something to prepare for that. So things like remembering to turn off your phone and notifications from your computer that might interrupt the discussion. Consider the space around you. You've got an opportunity to make use of these spaces, either behind the screen or around your screen. So use it wisely. You could have notes and things and prompts in the wall in front of you, which could enable you to keep maintaining eye contact throughout the interview, but you've still got those helpful keywords and phrases and prompts to remind you of what you want to be getting across. Tip 5 is to be aware of how you come across. So make sure that you're creating the right impression. Your you're going to be viewed in a smaller, more compact space than normal. This is really important because you're not going to be able to move around too much. And this could come across as distracting. If you can, maintain eye contact. When you respond, look into the camera, look at the people, be clear, be concise, make the best use of the silence and the gaps that are happening, allow them to finish the question and avoid interrupting. Having said that, if you do have a genuine issue with keeping still due to a medical condition, or if you've got ADHD, for instance, or you've got trouble maintaining eye contact, these are things that could be mentioned in advance of the interview so that the interviewers are aware and they can take this into consideration. A good organisation is going to foster a really diverse and inclusive environment, and it will welcome people from all different backgrounds and abilities. So it's entirely your choice if you feel it appropriate to mention. Tip number 6 is to showcase your own personality. This can actually be much harder virtually than you might think. It will require some thought. So if you think about how you can demonstrate who you are as an individual, what you consider to be your best traits, how you will build rapport with them, make sure you focus on your strengths though and your ability to learn new skills if you don't necessarily have everything that they're looking for on paper. This is another really kind of important piece of learning that comes out of our leadership masterclasses, that when you stop trying to emulate other people's behaviour and traits and you focus on your own unique character and strengths, you really come across as more authentic, more genuine, and you come across as more confident in who you are and what you can bring to the table. So, practice listing all your strengths so that they're at the top of your mind when it comes to attending interviews. Tip 7 is to make sure you dress appropriately. So think about what you would be wearing to a face-to-face interview. Follow the same principle. Dress according to how you want to come across. It's not only going to give a good impression and show that you're fully prepared, it's also a lot less distracting to know that you're dressed for the occasion. I did joke earlier about the old imagining the interviewer naked technique, and yes, they may well be naked from the waist down for all you know. Let's hope not. But actually, how you feel will be determined by how you dress, for sure. And so make sure that what you're wearing is appropriate for the role that you're going for. It makes you feel confident and it's comfortable. My 8th tip is to ask questions and take notes. It's important to show that you're keen to find out more about the role and what you can bring to it. For instance, what are their future visions and expectations, and how might you be a positive influence in driving this forward? What are you passionate about that aligns with their organisational values and their outlook? How will you put this across in a virtual interview? You might find it's harder to sort of understand the culture of an organisation you're interviewing for virtually, so make sure you come prepared for perhaps specific questions just to help you understand that environment. Tip 9, and I've already touched on this I guess, is to be yourself. As with face-to-face interviews, it's really important to be authentic and bring your own personal unique qualities to the forefront. But more than this, it's actually really important to find out if your own personality and energy is a good fit with the organisation you're applying to join, and that you've got that potential to be happy in that environment. We had a fantastic masterclass on our leadership program recently with Cheryl Brown, and she's been through an amazing journey, and she realised that to get to her journey to where she is now, she just had to stop trying to try and replicate other people's behaviour and just be herself and bring her whole self to the table. And once she did that, the doors started opening up for her because they could see that she was coming across as authentic and genuine, and all her natural talents and passion showed through. So it's really, really important. So express yourself, put your values forward clearly. Don't be afraid to be you. And remember, it can be more difficult actually to build that rapport online. So you might need to dial up, which is another recommendation from Cheryl, dial up your energy to ensure that you showcase your personality in the right way. And last but not least, tip number 10 is to follow up after the interview. If you haven't heard back within the specific time frame, follow up with the hiring team, ask for feedback. And if you haven't been successful this time round, bank that experience and build from it. You've got to remember that organisations you're applying for may also be getting to grips with their own virtual hiring practices, and they may well get things patchy or wrong in places as they navigate their way through as well. So, be considerate of this and don't take it as a personal failure if the interview didn't work out this time. Make sure you believe in yourself, because I'm sure that your remote interview success is virtually around the corner. That's it from me. Thanks for listening.